$104 million for parks over I-35, an affordable housing fight, the future of Austin's water, plus other council updates. Today on CityCast Austin, we're back with our favorite city council expert to talk about the 5 things Austin City Council did this month. It's Wednesday, May 28th. I'm Nikki Devon, and this is what Austin's talking about. Hello, I am here today with Amy Stansberry, editor-in-chief of the Austin Comment, for our monthly conversation.
So.
Yeah. Oh my God, this is amazing. I can talk to you every month. I'm eager to start talking about the council this week. It's been an interesting month. A lot of stuff has gone down.
Yeah, it's been kind of a dramatic month.
Yeah, I'm into it. Okay, so if you had to summarize Austin City Council's actions in May in just a few words, what would you say?
In just a few words, I would say contentious choices about our city's future.
I like that. I feel like that's right on the money. So I'm just going to get right into it because it's a lot. So finally, City Council made a big decision on the Interstate 35 construction project. They will be funding the support systems for the 3 decks and 2 bridges over I-35 for the measly amount of $104 billion. But going into the vote, I know there were 2 separate camps of the city council members, one that wanted to spend $49 million and the other at like $203 million. So how did they settle in the middle? What is going on?
Yeah, so this has been, it's interesting. I feel like often, and you know this, like you don't see city council like have votes that come down to the wire like this very often. This is pretty rare for Austin City Council.
True.
If things get put on the agenda, you kind of know that they're going to go forward. It's rare that we were down to like the day before, like 5 versus 5. Which way will the mayor go? He could be the deciding vote. That's really rare. They tend to have more agreement by the time something makes it all the way to a council meeting. And they'll make amendments and changes. But this was real difference of opinion here that I think really worked to change some of the proposal. So I think that group that was calling for more funding to build more of the caps, they sort of got negotiated downward, I would say, and kind of trying to scale that project down. And they kind of ended up with this idea that I think the mayor called it future-proofing. We'll leave the option open for the future. And so just for some background here, the original proposal to build these caps over I-35 came out of this, the idea or the reality that TxDOT is expanding the highway through downtown Austin. Work is going to be starting on that fairly soon. And City Council was, pissed, really. They were not too happy about this project to start with.
To put it mildly,
yeah. They were not happy.
We have no control. They have no control. Yeah.
Exactly. And they were not happy about it. People have long been upset, obviously, that I-35 was really built there in the first place. It divided East and West Austin. There's a whole long history there. And this is going to add more lanes, quite frankly, to I-35. And so this idea was floated, what if we could cap sections of it, build parks bridging East and West Austin? And at first, pretty much everyone was like, awesome, that's great. That's pretty unobjectionable. But then we started to see the cost. And that is really where disagreement started to happen. The original proposal was $1.4 billion. It probably would even be more than that.
Yeah.
And the city likely is losing a $105 million grant that was going to come from the federal government. So we lost that money. The city's budget is really tight. And there's already talk about putting a bond on our upcoming election in 2026 to fund all kinds of issues like climate change, mitigation, and affordable housing and parks. And all of a sudden, this was like another huge cost and expense. And that's where I think a lot of the debate started to come up. And certain council members were saying, hey, we could build, if we want to build parks, we could build a zillion times more parks for this
So
price.
many parks. So many more parks.
We could build way more parks. And we also have homelessness needs and affordable housing needs and all these things. Why are we spending all this money on these like kind of fancy downtown parks that only certain neighborhoods can build? That was kind of, we'll have access to. That was sort of argument one, right? And then the other council members are saying, no, I-35 has been this scar in our city for generations. This is an opportunity to finally bridge that gap, undo or kind of make amends for some of those historical injustices. And it could bring back acres and acres of public land to a part of the city where there's not a lot of public land. And they also kind of were seeing it as a way to mitigate the harms caused by this giant highway. And so that's sort of where the debate started to get going and sort of the two camps there. But at the end of the day, the real question is the money, because even, what they just passed and decided on is only to build the foundational elements for the caps. And I think that's really important to remember. That's why the mayor called it future proofing, right? Because we did not commit to build the caps.
Yeah, this is just to get it started.
Just to leave open the option.
The option. We're paying that much money just for the option of parks.
Correct. And of course, some of the council members feel confident that we can get the rest of the money and build the actual parks. But other ones definitely do not agree with that. They question that a lot. Why are we spending $104 million to maybe be able to do something in the future? And I think it's important for the public to know that, you probably saw some headlines. Oh, this approved. This does not mean you will not see caps on I-35. This does not pay for that. This just pays for the option. And so now the next question that's going to come up for city council and for all of us really is, do we want to pay for those caps and how do we want to pay for them? So kind of the next big deadline is November 2026. That is when we have to show some sort of funding commitment to build some of those caps. And where that funding comes from, that's the question now. Will that come from a city bond? Will that come from private philanthropy? There's been a lot of talk about trying to get private philanthropy involved in this conversation. Certain council members feel really optimistic about that. Other council members have said, nobody has stepped forward so far. We can't expect private philanthropy to come and save us. And maybe we rather have private philanthropy to fund other programs. So that has been a lot of where the conversation has been. So in 2026, that'll be another decision. So if you're a member of the public and you feel strongly like, I love the idea of caps, I hate the idea of caps, yes, this part of the conversation is over, but there's a lot more conversation to be had.
So much more.
We as voters might be able to decide whether or not we want to fund caps in a potential bond election. It might come up that private philanthropy gets involved. We're not quite sure yet, but there's still a lot of decisions to be made.
Wow. It's kind of wild. To your point, it's always really good when I worked at the city to see how the sausage was made, right? So I was imagining before that meeting, I knew what was going on in the mayor council suite. Everybody's talking to each other and having meetings and conversations in the hallway and like, it's chaotic. I mean, it's awesome, but it's a little, I picture just like ants running around, you know what I mean? Like, because that's what it was. That's what it's like. And so I was surprised when they came up with that number. I was like, what is going on with this number? And then I was also surprised about the fact, okay, so this is just so we'll have the possibility. We ain't building nothing. We haven't started anything. This is just to say, okay, this is on the table. This possibility is on the table. And that gives you a really good, clear idea of why some things take so long, because every single step has to be voted on and decided on, which is a good thing. But this is why these things take years and years and years and years and years and years.
Yes. And that timeline, I talked about November 2026. That's kind of if we want to build caps in the near-term future, near-term, the way city defines it, probably not the way you or I would define it,
right.
But in the relative near term. But technically, we could still, even if we decide no funding comes available in 2026, technically, they have until 2033 to decide to build caps. Now, if we do it in between 2026 and 2033, they could be more expensive. So there's like a deadline there. Like if we want a cheaper cap, picking it by 2026 is the way to go. Otherwise, after 2033, there's a 10-year moratorium on construction on I-35. So that means no caps could be built until 2043.
Oh my God. Okay.
So there's all these deadlines. It's very confusing, but basically what it kind of breaks down to, and there's a lot of confusing numbers in between, but it's like either we're building them now, basically, or we're really just saying, some future council in 2040s might decide they want to build this, and a future Austinites want to build
this. This makes so much sense because a couple of times I kept hearing this reference to like 75 years from now, this and this and this and that. I'm like, I don't want to hear about 75 years from now right now. I want to hear about what we are doing today in the next like 5 to 10 years. Let's stop talking about 75 years from now because, I might be the only person, but I can't fathom that kind of time. We're talking about outside of most of our lifetimes. So like maybe we bring this down a little bit. They should have explained to me the way you just explained it to me because that makes sense. Why didn't they just do that?
Yeah, and that's some of the debate you or the councilman is saying is like, we have immediate needs. We have a homelessness crisis. We have an affordable housing crisis. We don't want to do this. But other council members are saying, if we don't do it now, we'd have to wait 100 years to fix this crisis. So that's sort of the issue. Although there is still the ability, like I said, it's either 2040 or 2026. So we kind of have that option. There is still the chance that these caps could be built in the, near-ish future, the next 10 years, perhaps. But we don't know. We have not decided where that funding would come from. So no guarantees for caps right now.
Oh, my gosh. Okay, so we're going to shift gears to another huge topic. It was like several hours worth of public comment about this next thing, the affordable housing complex in West Austin called Acacia Cliffs. That's been on the agenda lately. It was postponed, right? Bring us up to speed. Why is this housing development set to be demolished and what will be replacing it? Because when I was listening to it, the impression that I get is that it's going to be demolished. Like there is no plan they're not saving it. They're just trying to get a zoning thing. Can you bring us up to speed on that?
Yeah. So Acacia Cliffs, it's this apartment complex in West Austin, 290 units of what's called in city speak naturally occurring affordable housing. And so what that means, that's like the best kind of affordable housing because that's affordable housing that the city does not have to subsidize. It's naturally affordable. And usually things are naturally affordable because they're older, right? As properties age, they just can't charge as high rents. And so that's what's happening at Acacia Cliffs. But the owner wants to demolish it and redevelop the site. And so in the process of doing this, they're seeking permission, a zoning change, to use something called DB90, which is a city program. It's a density bonus program. And these are basically allow developers that are redeveloping property to build higher or denser than they normally would be allowed to under the city code if they guarantee that a certain percentage of those units are affordable. So in general, density bonus programs, like in some ways can be great, right? If you're talking about a property that maybe didn't have any housing on it before, or, like maybe one small piece of housing property, and all of a sudden you might get, a lot of affordable housing. But that's not what's happening here. What's happening here is you have a property that already has affordable housing, and the density bonus won't make up for it. So I think the numbers are, it's currently 290 units. If it got redeveloped under this program, the developer wants to build 650 to 700 new units. So a lot of new units, but only 10 to 12% of them would be affordable, reserved for people earning 60% or below the median family income. Sometimes people call this MFI, which is about $75,000 a year. So that would only be 80 units of affordable housing. So to compare, 290 affordable now versus 80 in the future, plus a lot more additional units. So that is where the concern is coming into play. And so there's been a lot of really strong community organizing work coming out of the Tenants Association there and a group called Community Powered ATX that's been really trying to negotiate with the developer and figure out what could be done to stop this from happening or to make the impact less severe on the current residents.
Council has to approve the zoning change in order for them to do this. But, it was very clear that they said, regardless, they're demolishing it. So if they don't get the zoning, then the developer could technically not have any affordable units, right? And so I'm curious, do we think that the Tenants Association is just like, we know it's going to be demolished? Or do they really, really think like, we can stop this? I'm curious about that.
I think it's more about a lot of the push has been from some of the community organizing is one, at minimum, just better and stronger relocation benefits. So there already is city rules that say if you're doing something like this, I think it's like 4 months of rent has to be like waived or provided to kind of help people who are relocating. They want to up that to 6. Also increase relocation assistance, but then also what they really are pushing for, that's kind of at minimum, but what they also want to see is a change to the way this DB90 program is actually run, the way this density bonus program is run, so that if things are happening like this, where a developer's coming in and redeveloping the property, that you're still having the same amount of affordable housing units before and after, that it's a one-to-one, so that maybe these tenants could return to this property after it's been redeveloped and more housing has been added to it. So I think that is like the big ask and the big organizing effort. But what you're talking about is interesting. I think this is something I saw Councilmember Duchin, this is in his district, posted on the council message board last week. He said, voting against DB90 rezoning cases is very problematic for council. In their arguments for rezoning, developers leverage the fact that they may demolish naturally occurring affordable housing should a rezoning fail to pass, providing nothing in return to impacted residents or communities. That has turned DB90 into the lesser of two evils, preventing council from protecting Austin's most vulnerable residents.
I mean, it's true.
That's what you're getting at, right? It's like developers can threaten, well, we're going to demolish it either way. We could just demolish it and only build non-affordable housing, or we could build this smallish amount of affordable housing.
Yeah.
And so that is what council seems and organizers are trying to break free of. Like, how can we develop a better program that makes it so we're not in this situation? And so, like you said, they actually did get that postponement. So it wasn't voted on at the last council meeting, and now negotiations are happening. And it seems like Mayor Watson, Councilmember Duchin, the Tenants Association groups are saying that negotiations are happening. They're working on trying to make some changes to this program. So we're kind of going to wait and see, but I think it's going to be on council's next agenda, and we might see some proposals to the actual base program.
I love that. I think it would be best for the council. It gives them a little bit more power, a little more autonomy. It gives them a bigger seat at the table, because right now it just sounds like developers are like, take it or leave it. You want these little 80 affordable units or not? And, 75,000, I guess that's the cap of what you can possibly make. But who makes 75? Like, anybody?
Right. That's a big debate too. That's technically what the medium, the MFI, there's a lot of questions about that when we talk about the level of affordability.
Yeah.
A lot of people advocate for more. And I think some of those tenants association groups are advocating for also that, a lower threshold for that affordability.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This story has kind of had me like in a chokehold for a while. I've been paying attention to it because the last time they were in front of council, it was hours and hours and hours of public comment too. And, I think we had an interview with Chito Vela, and we were kind of talking about this where, back in the day, there were just many, many more, naturally affordable places to live in Austin. There were just these older kind of either condos or fourplexes or apartment units that were clean, they were safe, they were just older. And you could get, your college student could get a cheap apartment. Your mom could get it's just like a single mother with a couple of kids. You could get somewhere affordable for you to stay that was for you nice and safe and clean, but maybe too old for other people to live in. And now that's just, it doesn't exist in the city really anymore. And so it really begs that question of where are those people going to go?
Yes. And, I've been following a lot about our city's homelessness crisis, and
Yeah.
there's a huge numbers and funding crunch there. And when you look at all the numbers, the cheapest, best thing you could do around homelessness is prevent people from falling into homelessness in the first place.
Yeah.
And preventing this kind of situation is a big way to do that. And a lot of credit really goes to the community organizers who have been working on this. They've really made sure to press it onto council's agenda and to show that this is an issue and some of the policies that have been passed, that it can have this impact when it's being used to redevelop a property like this one. And a lot of times the city always says, the cheapest kind of affordable housing is the affordable housing we already have.
Right.
And so again, with all these budget crunches, we're talking about bond elections. We don't want to have to take out bonds and spend all this money to rebuild affordable housing that we already had. It's tricky.
Exactly. Oh man, I'm gonna keep my eye on this because of those 290 units, it's almost completely full, right? Like it's like 253 to 260 of those units are full.
And you have to remember, this is in West Austin. So, there is not a lot.
Nothing.
That is a neighborhood where there's not a lot of affordable housing and where the ability to live there affordably can provide access to a lot of other opportunities by living in those neighborhoods, different school opportunities, work opportunities.
Oh my God.
Parkland, green space, all these things. And so I think that also adds quite a layer to it.
And it's walkable. So then there's mobility and transportation implications as well. Oh, okay. Got to keep an eye on it. I'm sure we'll be talking about it again next month.
Yep.
So, okay, with so much sun here in Austin, I wonder a lot about solar power. Like I know that my sister lives out in, kind of far east in like a suburban area. She's worked with Austin Energy to get like solar power panels on her house, and there's all these incentives and blah, 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 blah. So solar power is always on my mind. And apparently the city is working towards generating 245 megawatts of solar power in the next 10 years. And so council is now looking for rooftops, kind of like my sister's, where they can put solar panels. So tell us what's going on here. Are there enough public roofs to make a difference? Or like, what is this about?
Yeah, like you mentioned, it's a goal of our city and our city council to increase the amount of locally produced solar we have in our community. Locally produced solar helps in a few different ways. I mean, one, it can help with like some grid stabilization things as well, like energy that's produced closer to home provides other benefits as well as obvious climate benefits. And we're falling behind on some of our city's climate goals. And so city council has been really eager to look out for what are some of the cheapest, most efficient, quickly actionable things we can do to move the needle on our emission reduction. And this locally produced solar is one of the ways to do that, because if we can find city-owned property, government-owned property, large pieces of property that have big rooftops to install solar, that's just way easier to do than even talking about putting solar on a bunch of individual people's houses. Some of these city buildings have huge, huge rooftops. Might as well utilize that land. We don't have to ask as many people for permission. Projects can go into the works faster and faster. And so one of the things council voted on this month is asking the city manager to put together a list of sort of what does that inventory look like? What are the city buildings that might be eligible for this, as well as other local government entities that we could work really closely with, like AISD or the county. And there's, the city, the county, we own a lot of land, actually. A lot. And so trying to figure out and doing it on the rooftops makes it easier. You don't have to worry about competing with open space, things like that. So I think they'll be coming back in a few months with the results of that. But that's another key one to keep an eye on, and trying to think of things like, you don't need to reinvent the wheel, right? We know we can do solar. Let's figure out a way to just deploy it faster and faster and make that work for our community a bit better.
Yeah, I do like this idea of just using what we already have in these buildings that the city owns. You know what I mean? Like, this seems like a no-brainer. I love this.
Yeah, so this should be an interesting one to keep an eye out on as the city thinks about how to take quicker action on climate.
Nice. So along those lines, Austin is looking for more water. And needs money. Oh my God, the water. It needs money for some big infrastructure projects. And early in the month, they gave City Manager T.C. Brodnick some direction on how to find it. And so Austin is applying for loans from the Texas Water Development Board. Can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, so Here at the state, we do have this Texas Water Development Board that
Mm-hmm.
gives out low interest or no interest loans to different water utilities throughout the state to figure out ways to use water more efficiently. It's an effort actually that you do see a lot of support from at the state. It's one of those rare bipartisan support things you still
Mm-hmm.
see at the Texas legislature. We need water. This is obvious. And so this is a program the state offers. And so Austin Water is going to apply for a few different projects and see if we can get some funding to work on some of those. So one of them is $45 million loan for Austin Water's. Now here's a word I'm going to try to say: polybutylene.
Oh, okay.
Polybutylene pipe replacement project. Can't tell you if I'm saying that right. But basically the situation is we have all of these water lines that are small. They connect the big water mains to customer meters. So kind of the intermediary ones. And some of them are made in Austin out of this polybutylene. And I guess this kind of material tends to fail or leak at a disproportionately higher rate compared to other materials like copper or high density polyethylene. Whatever, the materials are probably not that important to you. But the point is, the ones that we do have a lot of these that are made of this material that leak more. And there's been a lot of studies out there that show if we could just get a handle on leakage, we could save a lot of water. Like, this is a big area, and reducing leaks is a really desirable way to conserve our water, because we don't have to really make big changes in our lifestyle from doing that. It's a little easier, right? And we don't have to try and find new sources of water, right? We already have this water. We're just losing it, literally losing it. So this would try and fund a program to replace, I think, an additional 6,000 service lines. We're already in the process of replacing 2,200. So this would be like a pretty significant investment if we got this loan to try and just reduce that leakage. And then there's also a $10 million loan for Austin Water's Travis Heights Reclaimed Water Main project. All of them have these fancy words.
It's a mouthful. Yeah, all of this.
Exactly. But this is a program that got started in the Travis Heights neighborhood that's really working to try and beef up our city's reclaimed water distribution system. So reclaimed water is, non-potable, so non-drinking water. But the idea is trying to figure out ways to use this non-potable water for things like flushing the toilet or irrigation, watering your lawn. We don't need to have, drinking level grade water to flush our toilets.
Yeah, at all.
Right. But in order to do this, it sounds simple solution. Oh, we'll use more reclaimed water. But we just have this whole complicated pipe network. Everything is, we already have built our whole infrastructure in such a way that we use potable drinking water for everything. And so just switch over costs money, and we have to figure out all the piping. And so what this grant or a loan would help pay for is installing some of these water mains that we would need in order to expand this reclaimed water distribution system. Right now, this program is in the Travis Heights neighborhood. I think, the eventual goal would be that the city can think about ways that we could expand it all over. But of course, like laying these water mains and things like that, it's a long project, but
oh my gosh.
An interesting one nonetheless, and important to be thinking about different ways to increase our water supply, because this is an issue that is not going away.
It's not going away. Yeah.
Yeah, there's one more that's about another loan application in order to really beef up a little bit of our Walnut Creek wastewater treatment plant.
Okay.
The main thing that they're worried about with this wastewater treatment plant is that they haven't had a big flooding event there yet. But because of new floodplain maps that were recently drawn, this area where the wastewater treatment plant is likely going to, in the next 100 years, have some sort of severe flood, right? It's now in the 100-year floodplain. City staff are saying, it's not if, but when. And if that area floods, that could create real havoc on our sewage system. So we do not want that. And so this loan would be used to build a flood wall to try and prevent flood water from creeping into that wastewater treatment plant. And, this is part of this just resiliency thing. I think the city and municipalities across the country are having to think more about this, like how we are going to have to change our infrastructure for things we did not plan for 50 years ago, because now the world just looks really different. And in order to prevent big catastrophic moments like, the grid falling down, crashing and us not having water, et cetera, we need to be more prepared and try and figure out ways to make our infrastructure more resilient to expected events.
So it's funny, for all of that, $120 million for the loan seems like a steal. It seems like a steal. I mean, that's a lot of money, right? But I mean, if that's all we need in order to get these things done, it seems like a steal. So
yeah, and the cost of dealing with water issues after the fact and not planning is just too high, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, cities, communities cannot exist without water. And so this is an area that Texas Water Development Board, a lot of these loans, I'm sure cities and municipalities would like even more funding, but the legislature has been giving more funding for. We voted as voters on one of those propositions a few years ago to add more money to these funds. So this is an area where you actually are seeing some growth, and the legislature being willing to spend some extra money on this board to continue to distribute more money to municipalities across the state, because it's necessary.
The last of your 5 things happening this month, City Council this month took action to ban vape shops from operating near schools. And this is kind of a big deal timing wise because of all the THC stuff happening. And there just seems to be a general crackdown on all of the even remotely like things. How did this come about? And have they successfully banned this in other cities? Like, what's going on with this?
Yeah, so I think a key thing to note about this, and again, this is one that I wanted to highlight because people maybe saw a passing news headline or something, Austin bans vapes or something like that. But the way our city government works is first a resolution passes. And so that's what just passed this past meeting. And so that resolution only directs the city manager to prepare a potential ordinance that council would vote on in the fall. So technically, nothing has been banned quite so far, but we're in the process of working on something like this. The city manager is putting together the language for something council to vote on, and also directed to work with some stakeholders and things like that.
Okay.
And the idea, my understanding as it is now, again, we don't have the full thing, but it would be to make it so that new vape, e-cigarette, those kind of shops couldn't be built. It wouldn't have the ability to say if you already have a vape shop near a school, it's not going to get torn down or something like that.
Yeah.
It would be for future ones. But really, this is coming out of, the council members that really were leading the charge here were Vanessa Fuentes, Krista Lane. Councilmember Fuentes is really engaged in public health issues. This is one of her key issues. And so she says, she in an Instagram post, she said that public health starts with prevention. And so she kind of sees a lot of these smoke shops. She says, smoke shops don't belong next to schools. Here's how we're taking action to combat predatory marketing and addiction. And so that's sort of where this came from, I think, is this public health mindset, or trying to figure out ways that the advertising is not just like flashing in kids' faces, I guess, to and from school is the idea behind it. But it's not a done deal yet. So if you're interested in this topic as well, like I said, the city manager is supposed to be having some engagement opportunities for parents, for schools, for those smoke shop owners. So there is going to be some conversation that you might want to keep an eye out for if you're passionate about this one way or another.
Thank you for that distinction, because I was wondering, honestly, I was like, okay, so if vape shops already exist near schools, what does that mean for those business owners? But we're talking about future vape shops. That makes, I like the distinction, because I saw that and I was like, that'll be interesting. Okay, so is there anything else that you want to add that we didn't talk about, or any kind of sneak peek to the next month, or anything like that?
Well, I'll add an action item for folks. So
Heck yeah.
I feel like one thing that kind of fits with all of this, or been hanging over our conversation, is this idea of a 2026 bond election. So it's seeming really likely we're going to have a bond election in November 2026. That means voters, we get to vote on different public projects that would get funded, that would come with a tax increase. And right now, there's a ton of potential for what could be on that bond. We know caps and stitches seems like could be part of it. Parkland, affordable housing, homelessness services. And there is a city survey out right now where you can share some input about what you might want to see in that bond election. And so if you're interested in this, that is the survey to take. Maybe we can put a link or something in your show notes, but that is how you can get engaged and start to help shape what actually you see on the ballot in November 2026.
I love this idea of a survey so that we are included every step of the way. Like your engagement matters.
This is a way to start to help shape what you're going to see on the ballot. So it's a good opportunity to get involved.
Amy, as usual, it has been a delight. Thank you for being here and bringing me up to speed. Thank you for coming and doing that.
Thanks for having me. Anytime someone will listen to me talk about city council for a half an hour, it's a good day.
We'll see you next month. It's time for your midweek mood boost. Martin Middle School is having a groundbreaking this week that aims to further Austin ISD's goal of expanding mental health support for its students. The final phase of modernizations for the school begins this week in East Austin, and once it's complete, the school will have new HVAC, electric, and plumbing systems, but most importantly, a planned mental health center. Dr. LaShonda Lewis, Executive Director of AISD's Crisis and Mental Counseling, says once the center is complete, it will look similar to a classroom, but more cozy and comfortable to put students at ease. There will be space for group counseling as well as more private area for students to meet one-on-one with licensed mental health providers. These modernizations at Martin Middle School are expected to finish by the fall of 2027. So shout out to AISD for taking care of our middle schoolers' mental health. That's all for today here on CityCast Austin. You can find links to Amy's website and social media in our show notes. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Austin newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye, y'all.